And now today's featured guest is Keisha Bush, class of 2001. Keisha was born and raised in Boston. She received her bachelor's degree in management from Bentley and her MFA in creative writing from the New School, where she was a Regio Honors Teaching Fellow and recipient of an NSPE Dean's Scholarship. She has received fellowships from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's Workspace Residency, the Tyrone Guthrie Center in Ireland, Moulin Anef in France, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and Vermont Studio Center. And after a career in corporate finance and international development, that brought her to live in Dakar, Senegal. She decided to focus full-time on her writing. Her debut novel is No Heaven for Good Boys and is a New York Times editor's choice. So without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Keisha. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so excited to be here.
We're so excited that you're here and have written such a beautiful novel for us to enjoy. So we're going to get started because we're curious to know how many of you who are joining us today have been able to read Keisha's book. And we definitely don't want to give away any spoilers for those of you who haven't finished yet. So Bethany, you want to launch our poll? And if you'll respond to our poll to let us know where you are in process of reading the book, if you've started it, if you finished it, if you have it in your to be read pile. I know mine is getting higher by the minute.
Yes, mine too.
It's too hard. It's too hard to keep up.
Yeah.
All of my holds came off the library all at once, and it was kind of tragic.
Okay, so our results are the majority have not started but plan to do so soon, 60%. We have 2 that have finished it, 2 people, and 2 that are somewhere in the middle. So we're a little bit all over the board.
Okay, great. Well, for the majority of you that have not yet read the book, we will not spoil any ending for you, but we will talk about our characters ambiguously.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so that was helpful to frame our conversation. And first we'll get started, Keisha, with asking you some questions about becoming an author. So what influenced you to start writing?
I never planned to be a writer. When I was a kid, I used to write and I thought about becoming a writer. I would write bad poetry, starting probably from about 8 years old. But I read, the biographies of Phyllis Wheatley and Emily Dickinson back when I was very young. And I remember reading that like Emily Dickinson might have, received a quarter for a poem she wrote. I think Phyllis Wheatley, who, I think maybe got a nickel or a dime. And, even though I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, I knew like a quarter or a nickel would not pay the rent. And so I said, I'm going to become a lawyer, and I ended up going to Bentley, and I was on this trajectory to get my business degree and then go to law school and enter into the corporate law and maybe even tax law. And along the way, at Bentley, I was a philosophy minor with a focus on business ethics. And that actually had me sort of question whether or not I wanted to become a lawyer. And then I know this seems so random. It came up in another conversation and I remembered. I ended up watching Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves while I was at Bentley, and it completely changed my mind. I immediately changed my major from accounting and decided I wasn't going to law school. I was like going to be the rebel outside of the system. I was like, this is immoral. But it was really my philosophy minor that had such an impact on me. And so I entered into the corporate sector, an asset management firm, and then I went to Fidelity. And it's when I moved to New York, I was still in the corporate sector, and I ended up in the arts sector. I ended up moving to nonprofit and decided to just go and explore the world a bit more, and ended up in West Africa with the International YMCA. So I went to just go be a volunteer to do marketing, communications, whatever for the YMCA. And I ended up leaving Gambia, moving to Senegal. And as I was living there, again, I didn't have a dream of being a writer. I was just like, I want a job in the NGO sector. I saw all of these children on the streets begging. They would have the can on the face of the book, these tomato cans. Every single Taliban actually has a tomato can in the car, and it's actually a recycling. Tomatoes are a huge ingredient component in traditional Senegalese food. So, and the tomato, and families are really big, so they have these really industrial sized big cans of tomatoes, crushed tomatoes. And so because they're everywhere, the Taliban use them to collect alms. So that's money, food, rice, sugar cubes. And the Taliban, I was, when I was living in Dakar, I'm like, are these children orphans? Like, who are they? So I just started asking questions just out of curiosity, because they would come up to you and ask for money, but they were like barefoot and only wearing an oversized t-shirt and just looking really sad. And then I found, they're students of Adara. And Adara is a school of the Quran. So they're supposed to learn the Quran and memorize it. And the Taliban is a brotherhood, like a monkhood. So like monks go out to collect alms. Every day they collect lunch, dinner, and this in society supports them in that way. Well, it's sort of the same with the Taliban, except instead of just going out to collect alms for 2 or 3 hours a day, which is what it's supposed to be, they're forced to beg for 12, 16 hours a day. And I got to know clusters of the boys in my neighborhood. And I became their banana girl, which I'm extremely proud of. Because when I was first living in Dakar, I was teaching English. I had 2 students, and I didn't make a lot of money. I think I made something like $240 a month. And my rent for a room that I was renting was $140 a month. So I had roughly $100 a month, and I would take the local bus, Tata, which is an Indian company, downtown, and the bus was like 30 cents. I think was it 30 cents round trip? I think might have been 60 cents a day. And I would go teach my students. And so I lived very, very simply. So I didn't have a lot of extra money. And when you have 10 kids, like, hey, can I have some money? I'm like, whoa, I don't have enough for you. What can I give you? And bananas, I could buy 10 bananas for $2. So I was just like, all right, bananas? They're like, yes. And they got to know me, and this banana relationship ensued. And I would interact with them because they just had each other. They live in this sort of subworld amongst the adults and everyone else around them. And I know how important it is for all of us to have interaction, to be seen, to be loved, to be heard. And so when I eventually ended up with the job at the NGO, Oxfam Great Britain, I was like the broke Oprah in Senegal. I was like, bananas, pizza, hamburgers, do you want some jelly sandals? So I was like, I had my little clusters of Taliban, kind of like tripped out in terms of like what they could get their hands on. And when I came back to the US, I actually started a nonprofit. I wanted to work with the boys. But after living in Senegal for 4 years, I realized that I had missed home. I had actually missed America. I was like, I really miss Americans. Like, this is my culture. Communication is just different and easier. And there are things you don't have to explain. And my family is here, and all of my friends. So I realized that dedicating the next 10 years of my life to get a nonprofit really to have any kind of impact in Dakar, I didn't want to make that sacrifice, but I still wanted to help them. And I returned to New York and was working nonprofit again, and working now for my Bentley folks, my business folks. I was working like 80, 90 hours a week for a nonprofit and making $52,000 a year. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Okay. I couldn't even afford a new sofa.
That is not a typical Bentley path. You're right.
No, exactly. I was like, where did my decision go wrong? Like, and the problem with going nonprofit is, from corporate to nonprofit is an easy transition. It's extremely difficult to go from nonprofit back to corporate. And so I said, do I have any dreams in my life? I wanted to be a writer when I was 8, but the Phyllis Wheatley, Emily Dickinson financials had deterred me. But I said, you know what? There is money in publishing and book publishing if I focus and decide that it will be. And I started writing, and what eventually, after a year of writing, I wrote a book, thought it was great. It wasn't. I overwrote it. I sat down in 2010 and was writing, and this book eventually came forward. And I never intended to write about the Taliban, but when the beginning of this book started and I realized it was about the Taliban, I knew how right the book was. And I realized that I could dedicate myself and my time to trying to bring the story of the boys forward, and try to help them or impact their situation in this way. I'm a huge advocate for advocacy work. It sometimes doesn't seem like it has a huge return on investment, but advocacy, just in my small lifetime, I have seen advocacy just really push the needle when people collectively come together and push for change. And so this is sort of like, the book is a love letter to Senegal, but it's also a love letter to the Taliban boys. And a hope is like a Taliban learns English, reads the book, and realizes someone loved him, and then realizes that he can write his own story, and find some kind of freedom in that way. Such a long answer.
No, I love you. You really, the advocacy piece is, you can tell because you humanize these characters that people often disregard, right, or ignore.
Yeah.
So on that topic, Ibrahima and Etienne, are they based on real boys, or are they sort of conglomeration characters of some of the boys that you got to know?
They are. It's so interesting. So these two characters, Ibrahima is the protagonist, but Etienne is like the co-protagonist in so many ways of the book, the co-star. And I've been with them for so long, like 11 years, that they feel like living, breathing children to me. And they are a compilation of this group of boys who estimates say it's up to 100,000 children who are Taliban in Senegal. And the inspiration for 2 boys versus 3 boys or just 1 boy came from me buying egg sandwiches for these 2 children who I could tell were new Taliban because they were very clean. They were dressed in clothes, and had shoes. But the little one was like frightened of me. And every time I looked at him, he would just freeze. So I was like, I can't look at you, I don't want to upset you. And his brother, the little one looked about 4 and his brother looked about 8, 9. And when I had the clusters of boys I would buy bananas for, sometimes they would line up for me. Just like, I'm like, okay, you must do this at your dara or something. And they would put the little ones in the front, okay, the little one, you go in the front. And then I have, this line of 10 boys and I'm like, all right, banana, banana, banana. And that kind of love and kind of trying to look out for each other from the older boys who are children, who are like 8, 9, 10 years old, for the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, in really influenced the dynamic between Ibrahima, who's young, he's 6, 7 years old, and Etienne, who's 12. And Etienne has been a Talibé for 5 years when we enter the story. So he's already been a Talibé for 5 years. And Etienne and Ibrahima are cousins, but they didn't know each other really in the village, because Ibrahima was just a baby because of the age difference. And Ibrahima's family does not want to send him to this Dara. And they are pressured from their family to send them. And there are dynamics that really sort of tie the hands of the father in having to listen to his older brother. And one of them is inheritance and land. So in the US and some Western cultures, but not all, if a parent dies and there isn't a will, then the inheritance is split evenly amongst the children. But there are some cultures where the inheritance automatically goes to the oldest boy, period, and all of it goes, because we're looking at these patriarchal systems. And Ibrahima's father, Idrissa, is the younger brother. And his older brother sent his son, Etienne, to be a Talibé 5 years ago, and has eaten the cookie out of the cookie jar and believes in it wholeheartedly. When their father passes, though, all of the land that they're farming belongs to the brother, and the brother is now the patriarch in the family. And if Idrissa goes against his brother can take back the land. He can take, because he's sharing it with him. None of it is is given to Idrissa, but the family shares. But and then culturally or like societal wise within the village, you don't have police. You don't need outside police to manage how the village operates. The village operates within itself and is sort of like governed. But going against the majority in your village basically threatens the ability of like being able to use the well, which is the source of water. So the family, and I learned these things while I was living in Senegal, and I thought it was really important to show both sides. I think tradition and culture and society is really important, but here are the other sides of things where your individuality and your own desire for your own individual voice can get sort of drowned out or silenced based on what the majority of the culture or the majority of your society is deeming normal or deeming okay. Except wealthy folks don't have to deal with this. Wealthy folks don't send their children to Daras. The teacher comes to the wealthy family's house, teaches their kid the Quran for 1 to 2 hours. The family gives him a donation and he goes on his way.
The family dynamics, it was wonderful. The characters are so complex, and I know we were talking about it before, but I really loved the mother. That character for me, and my own child is behind me, so I apologize if he makes an appearance. Awesome. But just the way that no one believes her, and she is physically ill from being, separated from her son. Did you take other influences from like your own personal family dynamics for some of these characters, or was it all from your experience in Senegal?
It was a combination. So when I left Senegal, I was trying to do research because I realized the mother's narrative, her voice was really strong in the book, but I didn't really know. I'm like, how do mothers feel about this? And I stumbled upon one or two small tidbits from local grassroots organizations in Senegal. And one of them, this nonprofit, what they would try to do is take a talibé and and have him go back home. But what they would do is they would help the marabou, the teacher, find another way to make money, because this is a business for these teachers. Imagine you have like 100 students and they each have to bring back $1 a day. So that's $100 a day. That is times 30 days, that's 3,000 a month. That is good money in Senegal. You are upper middle, like over middle class, because a year that is 3 times 12, that's $36,000 a year. You are living at the higher end, the higher, class. And some of these teachers send their own children to private school. Their children are in private school while they have these boys living in abject, like, poverty and abuse. So this nonprofit helped this marabou find another source of income, and he went along with it. He was fine with it. And so because he was no longer a marabou, they sent the boys back home to their families in the village. And there was an interview with the mother, and basically what happened is they had to ask the father, will you take him back? And because of pride and, this, I need to be a good Muslim, the father said no. But they found a workaround where the boy could live with the aunt, who literally lived next door. And once everyone was okay, the father was okay with that, the aunt was okay with that, the mother of this boy admitted that she wanted her child back, but couldn't say anything about it, because she had to go along, she wanted to go along with her husband. And so that is sort of where Maimouna, the mother, she's actually not Senegalese. And I made her not Senegalese for that reason on purpose. Right. She's an outsider. She's accepted, but she's an outsider because she's not Senegalese. So she decides, I'm not gonna follow. I'm upset and I'm gonna show, I am going to express how upset I am. The truth is that she can't help it.
It was her passion overriding. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't have children myself, but I'm the oldest of 6 children. I have 5 younger siblings, and I have friends that I babysit for, but we're friends, and I babysit. And I love their children like they're my own children. And I love my siblings. Growing up, I loved my siblings as if they were my own children because I was so much older. And I can't imagine someone taking someone that you love so much, someone taking that person and you don't have the power to get them back, And so that's where, and stress and sadness tears the body up, and stress is sort of like the entry for inflammation and sickness and illness. And that was really important for me to show also. This is something that is a universal thing for all humans when you're under so much duress, Oh,
no, I thought that was amazing that you made that connection between the body and mind, because I think it often gets overlooked. So
yeah, like, oh, just suck it up, you'll be okay.
Right. But it can have an impact on your physical body as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question that was submitted while we're on the topic of these various characters about the rich boy, Mustafa. Yeah. And the question, let me make sure I get it correct here, was curious as to how you decided to add that character in the book. And he became such a nice escape. His home became such a nice escape for the boys. Yeah.
So this is going to be very interesting because while I was living in Senegal, I had my local Senegalese friends. I had friends who were Senegalese who had grew up abroad and then were back home for whatever reason. And they tended to be my closest friends too, because so much about us were just like culturally, they knew both worlds, and I was learning their world, you know, and then knew my own world. But what I discovered amongst my different groups of friends, there were 3 American women who did not know each other, but I knew them. And each of them were mothers. Not all of them had their children with them. One woman, her kids were back in the US, they were older. But each of the women were married to Senegalese men and well-to-do men. And each one of them told me in secret that they had taken Taliban off the street, brought them home, bathed them, fed them some food, let them watch cartoons, and then had them leave before their husbands came home. And I thought this was fascinating. And they all, you know, one woman, she lived in a bigger sort of family compound where other members of the family said, well, you know, you better not let your husband find out that you have Taliban playing with your kids. He will be pissed. And she was like, well, you're not going to tell him. And then my other friend was, she was older, and her husband was at work all day, and they lived in an apartment complex tower downtown. And she was like, yeah, you know, my husband's not going to find out about this, but I let those kids watch TV, and I, you know, fed them some lunch, and we washed their clothes. And I thought it was so fascinating. And when you're in Dakar and when you're in Senegal, because these boys are all over the country, you do want to take them home, you know, but they are the legal, those teachers are their legal guardian now. And taking those boys is like kidnapping them from the marabou. So I thought it was really fascinating. And just in my own interactions with the boys, I realized that it depends on luck, but that luck gives you reprieve from walking the streets all day, having to raise this money. So I realized that in the story, Ibrahima and Etienne needed that reprieve, you know? And Ibrahima, you know, he's 6 and he turns 7. He needed to see and realize, because Ibrahima already knows that this is wrong.
Right.
From the very start, he's just like, this isn't working for me, you know? And when he meets Mustafa, this wealthy boy, it's so re-solidifies for him, yeah, you know, there's this whole other world out there that I deserve, you know? And I think that's important for all of us to kind of understand, because I think everyone at some point in your life, you experience something that is just not fair. And it's really easy to self-identify with it and say, I don't deserve. And that is not true. I don't care what walk of background. I don't care if you had a loving family growing up. I don't care if you have money. I don't care if you don't have money. Everyone deserves to be treated like they're human, and deserves to be loved and treated with kindness and empathy and forgiveness. And although Ibrahima is the small child, the lesson that he is learning, I think, is a good lesson for all of us to be reminded of, for ourselves and for each other, you know?
Yeah, they're just kids, and you really capture that they're just, you know, just trying to have fun and get through the day. And when they have little breaks, it's so nice to see that child, because they are asked to do such adult things.
Yeah.
It's nice to see them play as children. Now you showed us the cover of your book with the art. How was the art selected? Did you make that, or is that an artist, the tomato can?
So the art is really interesting. They sort of came to me and they said, hey, do you have any ideas for the cover? And I said, oh, you know, let me think about it. And I have a lot of visual artist friends and other folks. And so I sort of reached out to an old designer, a friend of mine who used to design for me at another company. And we talked about it and we sort of kind of whatever. And there were a couple of different iterations, but she was like, oh, what about a can? Because I wanted an actual photograph, but they decided to go with like art. And I mean, the can idea that I had is very different from this can, but the can seemed like a really cool idea. And the red bird, is this character in the story. And it's interesting because the cover did not have to be green. I was cool with another color and I had other options, but green is one of my favorite colors. I don't know how that happened, but I love other colors too. And so it was sort of like this iteration. I liked a different cover, but they said I couldn't have that cover with the other can. So we went with this one. And then I had different colors. I wanted a color that was just different than what we see out there right now. And the designer came back with this sort of like deep, earthy green that I really liked.
Yeah, it definitely is not like every other cover. I like it. Oh, we have a
And-
question.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And
Keisha.
I had a list of friends where I said, which ones do you like? I like to get like my kind of group collective, like, share your ideas. And so that's really how this came about.
Oh, good, good. Well, we'll give them credit. Your personal board of directors.
Yes,
There.
yes,
Good,
I love
good.
that.
Oh, good, good. So someone's asking, does the shape behind the boys have a significance on the cover? Or it's the tomato, right? Or is it?
Yeah, so what's
I see it.
interesting,
Kind of like an hourglass-ish.
it looks like an hourglass, but like there is, if you Google Tally Bay tomato can, just to Google Tally Bay and look for images, there are some images on there. Most Tally Bay have an iteration of this tomato can. It's a really particular tomato can.
Like a brand kind of.
Yeah, this is the tomato, but this is like supposed to be writing, but it kind of just meshes together and it looks like an hourglass, but it's really a tomato.
No, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We also had a question about the plight of the Taliban after they leave their marabou when they're old enough. We didn't really get to experience that. Are they then respected when they go back to their village? Did they earn something for their families?
No. So this is one of the reasons why I feel like this book is so important and has sort of a global impact on all of us, even though, I'll talk about that connection. So around 15 years old is when a boy doesn't qualify to be a Taliban anymore. And after you read the book, you'll kind of understand why. It's really hard to take a 6'4" or a 6 foot or a 5'11" 15-year-old and force him to beg all day and then beat him when he doesn't give you the money that he raised. It's not workable. The problem with a lot of these children, though, are that they have been away from their families and their village for so long, and they absolutely feel abandoned. And they're uneducated. They have experienced sort of this dog-eat-dog world, fighting amongst themselves for scraps. Actually, some Taliban actually become marabous themselves, which is really scary. And for the rest, I felt like this book is so urgently important because for the rest who do not become Taliban, the question is really, what does a Taliban do? And where does he go at 15, 16 years old? If he just doesn't continue this cycle of abuse with other children. And, I'm really big about like keeping up with the news, international news, global news. And I've been thinking a lot about like groups like Boko Haram and these other ISIS. And the truth is where do they get their recruits? And Senegal has this market, this target, this segment of the population of up to 100,000 boys who are disconnected from their community. And when you think of these groups, when they come in and say, we'll give you family, we'll give you food, we'll give you housing, just follow us, be my soldier. These Taliban are already been soldiers, right? And I, have dated and have had folks who, have done tours in Afghanistan who are being sent over to sort of fight and deal with groups and the terror that some of these groups have enacted on innocent people. And then all of a sudden, you have American troops over there, and our folks and our family and our brothers and sisters are now in danger. And a perfect example is, was it ISIS? I think it was ISIS or Boko Haram, one of those. They had moved into Mali some years ago, and they destroyed Timbuktu because they called it pagan. And they were forcing Malians to adhere to Sharia law, and they created terror. Now, I have met Malians when I was in Senegal. I swear that they are the kindest people on the face of the planet. They're like one of the kindest. I have never met a mean Malian. No, they're never trying to rob you or trying to get something out of you. It's just friendship. And I have another special place in my heart for Malians, because when I was in Senegal, the Dogon are the pygmies from Mali, and they live in the mountains. And when the slavers were coming over, Senegalese people fled into Mali, and the Dogon hid them. And because nobody wanted pygmies, they didn't go and bother them up in the mountains. Like, this is how beautiful Malian people are. And Timbuktu is it's not just for Malians, it's for all of us. So, I don't want Taliban children who should be with their families becoming recruits later on that are now part of this disruption of peace for other people and for all of us, because we're all connected. And so, did I answer the question? Sorry.
You did. You did. Well, and to add on that, since we spoke before the event started, yeah. So then tell us, is there another novel in the future for these characters?
There is. So while I was writing No Heaven for Good Boys, I thought about it a lot, but I just didn't see it. And then in November, so random, but very specific, November of 2019, I was talking to one of my editors, and it was like right before the conversation, whatever, Ibrahima came back to me as an adult, and the story has been unfolding. And I hope that this is true, because I feel I've seen them. Mustafa, the rich boy, is in the story. Ibrahima is an adult, he's in the story. And one of the other Taliban are in the story also. And Ibrahima's sisters are in the story. And I'm very, very excited.
I liked them. They were good too.
I love the sisters. I love
Little
the sisters.
mamas. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that was good. Okay,
Yeah.
good. And so how long does a process like this take you then? Like, what will be your process from that November 2019 where you saw Ibrahima again, and now you're gonna bring them back to the page?
It's interesting because I think it's going to be a while, and I'll tell you why. The first book I ever wrote was in 2009, and I thought it was awesome. And then I reread it and I was like, ooh, this is really overwritten. This isn't great. but it was a good try. And then in 2010, the first draft of No Heaven for Good Boys came out. And I wrote that in about 6 months. I write pretty quickly when I have the time to do it. And then in 2011 to 2012, I actually rewrote No Heaven for Good Boys from scratch with a professor, a writing professor and author at the New School. It was a continuing ed class. I'm a huge advocate for taking classes. Like, I'm just like, oh, I need to learn something new, take a class. If it's not in a book, you know? And so because I needed to rewrite and revise it, or just, I didn't know I needed to rewrite it. I knew I needed to revise the book. And I did not realize, but I learned pretty quickly that editing is not something that is just like a natural skill. It's a learned skill. And that's why I went and took that class, because it was specifically to focus on revise and edit. And the advice from that professor was the book needed to be rewritten in a different point of view. The original draft was omniscient. So like the narrator knows what everyone is thinking.
Right.
And No Heaven for Good Boys is written in third person, but third person close. So sometimes when you're reading No Heaven for Good Boys, it can feel like first person, but it's not. So third person allows me to tell the story from different points of view, from different characters. And we get 4 of those. We get Ibrahima, Etienne, the mother, and the teacher. But third person close, you see, when you're reading that point of view, when you're reading that character, what that character is talking, you only see the world through that character's eyes, no one else's. And so that gives you a very close, like, embodiment of that particular character in that moment. And I don't break that. And so third person close gives the reader a more intimate experience of the world that the Taliban are in. And what was the question?
The question was like your process. So you obviously you had to go back and you rewrite. So do you think it'll be a faster process this time
for this
around?
next book? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. That was the question. So this next book, so this book, I've been in this process for 10 years. You know, publishing is very special in of its own self. And so I've actually written 2 other books while I was waiting for this book to come out. So I have a memoir and I have another fiction book. And those will probably come out next. And I have 3 works in progress right now, which is a dystopian, a literary sci-fi. I didn't realize it was sci-fi. People are like, this is like sci-fi. I'm like, it's literary. And then a memoir that uses the fantastic, but I'm hoping that that's just a novella. Beautiful kitty. But to write this next iteration of Ibrahima's story, I actually need to go back and live in Senegal and travel around the region a little bit, only because No Heaven for Good Boys is based off of me living in Dakar for 4 years. And I took those 4 years and I condensed them into about a year. So everything that's happening in No Heaven for Good Boys, the structure of No Heaven for Good Boys is nonfiction. And then I put I drop not fictional characters into the house. And so I'll give you an example. There are student riots that happen at Dakar University.
Right.
Those riots really happened at Dakar University for the reasons that are listed in the book. And that when the characters see the riots happening, I actually saw that by accident because I didn't understand what was going on. I was trying to go get lunch and they're like, what are you doing? Get out of here. And I'm like, oh, okay, no lunch today. And so to write Ibrahima as an adult, I don't know that world anymore. Like, this is like 20 years in the future, 25 years, later. And Senegal and Dakar has changed very much, the architecture, building, development. And so to write that, I need to go back for at least, I feel like at least 6 months. And to write some of the other narratives, I think I should travel outside of the region a bit more.
Well, that will be exciting. We can't wait to
Yeah.
see what you capture in the next book. I'm going to ask you now a question. I know we have another Bentley author listening right now, Bentley alumnus author. So as a fellow alum and author, how did your Bentley experience influence your writing, if at all?
It did. So I tell people, especially within the kind of art world and the writing world, that I'm not telling artists to go back and get a business degree, but I'm like, it would be really handy if you did. Because this sort of trajectory, the last 10 years, I don't think I would have been able to write as much had I not had a business degree, specifically from Bentley, in terms of like the sort of rigor that we go through. Like, we take economics and statistics and accounting, finance, operations management, law. And so for 8 years of the last 10 years, I actually ran an Airbnb business. Before I went back and got my master's of fine arts, I was torn between going back to get my MBA in finance with a concentration in entrepreneurship. And I will tell you all, finance comes pretty easy to me. Unfortunately, I find it kind of boring. But I was like, money, So I'm gonna go the finance route. And then I was torn and I decided to be, go back for the MFA because I did this business sort of thing, I forgot what you call it, like a business, it's not really a business class. When you have those sort of pods and it's fast track for entrepreneurship or tech companies. I did one of those in New York City for a business idea that I had, and it was really good. But this accountant said something to me. She goes, you don't actually need to go look for VC funding, venture capitalist funding, because you have funding from this other business that you're running that's sort of almost passive income, to start your other business. And I realized that, I was already running a small business that was profitable. Why not go and explore my dream and pursue my dream as an artist? Because it gave me the flexibility to go back to grad school full-time, as opposed to having to work a full-time job. And I was able to travel and do artist residencies afterwards and just take blocks of time while I wrote. And so, but I don't believe, because truthfully, I'm not doing Airbnb anymore. I'm tired of it. But when I would look at other Airbnb hosts, like in New York City, I would just look at them and tell them, like, you have no idea what you're doing. Your pricing is all wrong. Why are you charging so cheap? You're actually hurting the market, and so like, I understood these things. I understood that I didn't need to keep my calendar full for 3 months in advance, because I can charge higher and get the last minute folks coming in and make like double the income, and then not have to work a second job or another job. So in that sense, having a business degree has been super vital. And now that the book is out, I have always understood that the publishing industry is not the best at selling books, in my opinion. Even the film industry has better formulas on how to like have a blockbuster weekend. You throw this much money at it, you do these things, and you get a blockbuster weekend, even for the worst movie. Once people go to the movie and they tell their friends not to go, then it's a bust. But you can get that blockbuster weekend. And with books, there's this idea that like, you just throw a book out there and see what happens. What kind of business model is that? You know, like it's just very frustrating. And as time has come along or has happened, I naively thought that, books are intellectual property. And I believed that the quality of my book would determine how well it does and how much support it would get from a publisher. And unfortunately, that is not true. It's literally from acquisition, so from when the publisher acquires your work, when they buy your work, it's a lottery. I've been just thinking about just going to play in the Mega Millions lately. Like, it's really been like, I might have a better chance at winning the Mega Millions than getting your publisher to actually support your book financially, because that's another lottery. And as a marketing person, as somebody with a business background, I understand that you don't come out with 20 products and try to push them all at the same time. You will dilute, your market is overwhelmed, your buyers, your audience, they don't know which one to pick. And so you have to pick some, winners. And that choosing of the winner has nothing to do with how well and how great the story is. And so that has been frustrating. But my background, because after I left Bentley, I went into a little bit of sales, but marketing, communications, branding, PR, sort of that kind of all of it, little bits and pieces of it, and events. So I have had to, once again, thank the heavens that I have this business background and experience to be able to say, okay, I'm frustrated, like, many writers, but let me put together a strategic marketing plan and, let me reach out to my community. And that's something else that we learned at Bentley, to treat your classmates nice. Do not burn your bridges. Because when your classmates go out into the world and you're looking for that job and your classmate is the CEO now, you're gonna want to make sure you didn't treat that classmate and bully them and all of these other things. And so that has always, I've understood that from the very beginning, and my community has been extremely supportive. Like Bentley, which is my undergraduate alma mater, New School, which is my graduate alma mater, and all of the different communities that I have been a part of. And also as a writer, I did not realize that like within the social media world that I'm an influencer now. I was like, I don't have 100,000 followers though. And they're like, whatever you say, I'll go buy it. And I'm like, really? Okay, let me be responsible, in terms of how I support other writers and how I treat people. But I mean, that's already a part of who I am. But just being a responsible citizen and a responsible literary citizen is super vital. And that has been paying off in its own way. Along with me just being, comfortable that I'm not treating people terribly.
Well, we love that that's the foundations came from Bentley, so that's good. And you've got that business sense. We have a question asking if, given your experience with the traditional publishing world, would you consider an independent option for your next books?
Actually, yes. So, one of the things I learned about bureaucracy in the nonprofit world was bureaucracy is just like a whole bunch of people's egos. Like, it's just like ego driven. I'm just a fancy word for egos. And within the publishing world, you know, but okay, within the big five, because there's a difference too, right? I guess a lot of writers want to be within the big five, but because I have read so much about the publishing industry, I had always been open to like a medium press publisher. I love Grey Wolf. I love all the books that come out of Grey Wolf, and there are like several others that are just really amazing. Those and independent publishers, they don't have as much money, right? To have the marketing team and the PR and the design teams. But when you realize when you're in the big house that it is a lottery in terms of whether or not you get support. And if you don't make that lottery, you're not getting the support anyway. And so I'm paying for my own marketing. And I've teamed up with independent bookstores that have been like super amazing. So instead of looking for book sales on Amazon and pushing that in the way a lot of writers do, I have found such an immense level of support and love from independent booksellers. And one bookseller actually had a segment on a local ABC news station and pushed No Heaven for Good Boys there. I was like,
Hey.
dude, Bezos would never do that for me. Bezos doesn't know who I am. So, you know, these sort of different legs. And I've been thinking, you know, when you think of the big conglomerates, though, they have an edge on everything because of the amount of money they have, the amount of time that they've been in the industry. But I've been really thinking about like my own trajectory as someone within this industry. And I'm like, you know, does it entail becoming an independent publisher myself? Or does it entail, you know, teaming up with an independent publisher? Like, I don't know exactly what that is, but, you know, Penguin Random House is trying to buy Simon and Schuster, which would take the big five to the big four and leave everyone at a disadvantage, and also homogenize even more whose books actually get bought in advances. It would impact advances a whole lot because you would only have 4 options in terms of where these, you know, in terms of like the bigger advances. But I've been thinking a lot. I know a lot of some really big authors have actually self-published, because if you already have the readers and the audience and you're already paying for your own marketing and PR, or, you know, doing all of this, why do we need these houses? And so I'm in that space right now, but I know also as a debut writer that Random House on the spine of my book has people say, oh, you know, okay, you can walk through this door. So I'm in a very interesting space right now. I have not sold my second book. For everyone out there who is thinking about being a writer, I always thought that having a 2-3 book deal was amazing. It is not. You're really good. You're really great at just selling 1 book at a time. You make more money that way. And if you end up, and I'll give you an example of why I'm so glad I didn't have a 3-book deal or a 2-book deal. I've been at Penguin Random House for 5 years. It does not take 5 years from acquisition to release of your book. But I had 3 imprints and 5 different editors because my contract is with Penguin Random House. It is not with the editor. So when those editors, when the imprint was shuttered, and it needed to be shuttered because they weren't publishing their books. I got transferred, and then that editor quit, and then I got transferred again. And that held up my money, right? All of these changes, it held up my career. because it was like, do I leave them? Like, what do I do? Do I leave them and start over? It was not it has not been a good experience. But what I used that time to do is I wrote 2 more books. I used that energy for creation. And so, like, for writers need to understand the business of publishing and book publishing as much as possible before sort of coming in blindly, because no one likes to feel like the wool is pulled over their eyes. But even as they try to pull the wool, I just put 2 little peepholes, like, I see you. I see what's going on.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
so
gosh.
It's really interesting. And I don't think too many people have all of the answers, but like, as a writer, independent and medium, like independent presses are really great. And I don't know, I may end up at one, for the next book or in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are at this time is flying by, but maybe people will hang on for just a few more moments. I would love to ask you what you're reading now. Do you like to read as much as write? And what are you reading right now?
Okay, so what am I reading right now? So it's really interesting because I am a huge book nerd and I have books everywhere. But if you go to my Instagram, it's at Keisha Bush. And then I'm also on Facebook, Keisha Naomi Bush, or I think it's misspelled. Naomi's misspelled. Whatever, it happens. I'm going to come out with like my summer reading list. So I am reading a book for a friend of mine that I'm going to blurb. His book comes out in the fall, but I just picked up You Are Your Best Thing. Does anyone know about Brené Brown? She is amazing. I love her. I don't know her, but I love her. She has the Netflix special called Call to Courage. And it's amazing because it's talking about like vulnerability. And in 2017, it was 2 a.m. I was in my room by myself and I said, I'm going to practice vulnerability. I did not know what that meant. Nobody heard me. And I didn't know how to start, but I knew that there was something that I needed in my life. And so she's just come out with this new book with Tarana Burke. And I'm going to be reading this because it's talking about vulnerability, but for like Black and people of color. And I saw Brené talk about like, she's like, how do you ask someone who lives in violence to be vulnerable? So I think this is really interesting. I plan to read that. I actually just ordered all these books. They just came yesterday because I found out that I can get books 50% off if they're published by Penguin Random House.
Nice.
So I'm a huge fan.
They tell you now.
Yeah, exactly. So I just got this by George Saunders, Fox 8. It's so tiny. I'll read that in like an hour. And then I just got Yagassi's. So I also have her Homecoming that I didn't read yet. So I'm going to read Homecoming and then I'm going to read Transcendent Kingdom. And these books are the books that I'm literally going to be reading over the next month. And then I just got this one. There's a Revolution Outside My Love by Tracy K. Smith. She's a poet. And John Friedman. And I love John Friedman's work and I love Tracy's work. So I'm interested in this. And then everyone has read this. I have not read it.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just like everyone. So
my husband just read it.
So I need to read it. And then I went to a book event, a Zoom event. And I saw, so George Saunders was there talking, and I have his other book, A Swim in the Pond in the Rain. But I saw Sandra Cisneros speak. I don't know her, but she is so cool. This one's called My Wicked, Wicked Ways. Very interesting. I think this
Cool
is
art. Yeah.
poetry. And then I got her other book, because I tend to do that. Woman Hollering Creek. Yeah.
Oh,
And I heard this one is really good. And she's the author that did House on Mango Street.
oh, yeah. That's
Yeah, I know that title. And I have that book somewhere too that I haven't read yet. So along with the book that I'm blurbing, and then I have a couple of events coming up. There are 3 other books that I need to read. I am actually going to dive into all of these. And I'm going to try to just take like 2-3 hours every night before bed, 2 hours, let's say just 2 hours, to just sort of dive into them. And I have a couple of other books. Do you have those books that you're kind of reading along the way? You know, there's that book, it's somewhere here. The Body, I always misplace it. It's about trauma in the body. It's here. I just have a hard time finding it.
Well, we will follow up, especially with our Bentley book clubbers, because they're always looking for good reads. So
Okay.
we
Yes.
definitely will do that. And then, not to put you on the spot, but if people want to be in touch with you,
Yeah.
what's the best way for them to do that?
So there's a couple of ways. I'm active on Instagram and I share stories. If you go to Instagram, there are pictures from when I was living in Senegal from 2004 to 2008 with stories about like how they're connected to No Heaven for Good Boys. So that's ongoing. So you can find me there, Keisha Bush. I didn't know people did fancy names on Instagram. And then Facebook.
You're lucky you got it. My name is so generic.
Yeah.
Add 30 numbers at the end. I feel you. Keisha Bush is perfect.
Keisha Bush. I'm lucky. I am really lucky that I got that. And then for email, you can reach me at info@keishabush.com. And I do check that email. And it's better because it's not mixed with all of the spam email in my other one. And then I'm on Facebook, you know, like everyone is on Facebook, Keisha Naomi Bush, but you can always direct message me on Instagram. Oh, I'm on Twitter, Keisha B. I didn't know what I was doing.
That's a good handle too.
And so people reach out to me. If you direct message me on either Twitter or Instagram, I will literally email you back. I will message you back. Facebook is just weird. I don't see the direct messages as much, and I don't like the interface as much. Or you can just email me directly at info@KeishaBush.
And Bethany put that in the chat. So hopefully
Okay.
you're going to have lots of new emailers, pen pals from all of
Awesome.
us. So I hope that that's okay.
Yeah.
But this was great. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Your book is amazing. We wish you
Awesome.
so much success.
Thank you so much. I'm so just humbled and super grateful that, you know, Bentley and the alumni department has just been so supportive. And Bentley has been, my Bentley community, like all of my classmates, you know, we're all still super connected. And, you know, Bentley is something that, Bentley formed me into the person that I am today, and I would never give that back. And as an artist, I have something that a lot of my artist friends really struggle with in terms of the education that I received here. And I didn't know it at the time, how pivotal understanding the business world would be. And I'm always trying to get, you know, mentees or whatever to take business classes. I'm just like, dude, you need to understand this, you know? And so I just feel really, really lucky and really blessed. And yeah, we charge forward, we try to do this.
Us too. We feel very fortunate. And next time we'll have to bring you and have you speak to some of our students too. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be really great, because sometimes I think we don't see or understand. We're like, oh, I have all of these different interests. How can they meet each other? And they
Right.
can meet each other. you know, and I've learned that now. And it's something, you know, I teach, you know, adjunct like literature and English classes sometimes. And I try to tell my students, it's okay to be interested in computers and psychology. Actually, do they go together, you know? But when you're young, sometimes you don't see those correlations. Like I have someone interested in like biology and writing. And I'm like, of course that goes together. What are you talking about? You know? So yeah. Yeah, no, it's
Well,
great.
thank you so much. Thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
joining us from wherever you're tuning in from. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you. And thank you, Keisha. Have a
Thank
good night.
you. You too. Bye.